Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Sin and Tonic. Today's story is that of the Steenkamp murders. An entire family murdered with the exception of one on their farm in South Africa. This one's a bit of a corker. Let's go. Sin and Tonic! Just before we begin, I have got the fan on again, but I've put it on a lower setting. We are having a freaking heatwave, which is just not my favourite. So yeah, I was like, oh, I'm never using the fan again because the sound, it really upset me when I was editing. It peed me off, but I can't. I've put it on a low setting. It should be fine. If not, I'll cry. And plenty of hydration today. So today we are going to South Africa, Northern Cape Province. I think I'm going to say this incorrectly, but I'm going to read it. I think you don't pronounce the G. I should have asked my friend, but I didn't see her today. She's from South Africa, you see. Griekwastad Farm. Griekwastad Farm. The case is known as that name, Farm Murders, and the family were the Steenkamps. On the 6th of April in 2012, a 15-year-old boy would arrive outside the local police station in his dad's pickup truck, covered in blood and very distressed. He was shouting, "They've all been shot, they're all dead." Just a very traumatic and dramatic scene. This boy was John Steenkamp. He was the son of the Steenkamps, and it was a gruesome sight. He had his arms and his legs were covered in blood, like you couldn't see skin. And this was really not what the police were used to in this area. It was a rural area and a low crime rate, so it was very unexpected. However, there is a terrifying type of crime that happens in rural areas of South Africa, and it has done for some decades now, and they are farm attacks. And because these rural areas, like the farms, are, quite far away, they're isolated basically. So that makes them a soft, easy target for criminals because there's literally no one around to help you. And they are quite barbaric, these farm attacks. Normally, the people involved that live on the farm are tortured and murdered, and the property is then burgled. And they take things like money, guns, they look for weapons. Most farm owners have guns, and vehicles as well. So lots of it's all about money, but just awful. The reason I mention these horrific farm attacks is because Don was from a farming family and they lived on a farm. He lived with his father, Dion, his mother, Christelle, and his sister, Marthella. When he arrived at the police station, he was very distraught and distressed, but he gave a very brief story about what had happened and why he was covered in all of this blood. He said that he had gone to the shed on their property to fix a light bulb or fix something, a lamp, and while he was in the shed, he heard gunshots coming from the house. So he was terrified, as you would be with these. Everybody knows about the farm attacks and things like that, but I think it's one of those cases where it's like, oh, it would never happen to me, which it always sadly happens to someone, doesn't it? So he was so terrified that he hid in the shed. He hid. And then after about 10 minutes, he said, or a little while, he went back into the house and found his entire family murdered. They had all been shot to death. I mean, that is just horrific. Absolutely terrified that the people that had done this were still there, Don had ran back to the shed, got into his father's pickup truck and driven it to the police station where this is where the story is unfolding. Don went into a state of shock after telling the police what happened, and they allowed him. He was quite agitated and quite distressed because he was covered in his family's blood. So they allowed him to go and wash it all off. I think he was in a like a diner or a cafe opposite the police station, and he was allowed to sort of wash himself because he was just in so much distress. And the police officers themselves were in a lot of distress and very upset because it was a small community and they knew the Steenkamps. So they were deeply saddened by what Don was saying had happened here. The Steenkamps were very well known. They ran 5 successful farms, and they lived on one of those farms, and that's where Don had come from. And I believe the land had gone down like 3 generations of the family on Dion's side, I think. But also the mother, Christelle, she was also from a farming community, and so it was just in their blood. They were very well loved in the local community. They were a church-going family. They were very wealthy, very wealthy. However, they weren't, what's the word? They were humble. So they didn't have flashy bits and bobs. They didn't flaunt their wealth. They just were wealthy, and they were all about working the land and having a farm. Dion and Christelle were really well respected and well liked, and everybody that knew the children said that they were really lovely kids. They never went without anything, but they weren't spoilt. And it was interesting because a family member said that Don was Christelle's favourite child, and Martella was Dion's favourite child. Sorry, the names were just not coming to me then. I should have things like stuck around sometimes. Genius idea. Anyway, if I do say so myself. So, excuse me if I'm like a shiny hot, like craziness. Whew. It's only set to get hotter as well. Can I cope? No. Don't want to moan about it too much though. Gets boring. I get tired of myself. I get stroppy with myself. But I just can't help it. The children went to boarding school, but they came home every weekend, and that was really important to the parents. They wanted to have as much time with them as they could. I think it's because the schools are quite far away, so I think that's quite a normal thing. So the kids went off during the week, like, I don't know, like a 4-hour journey or something. Like, who's going to do that every day? And then they came home to be with the family on the weekends. Martella was described as very sweet and kind and popular. She had lots of friends, but she was a lovely girl. She was quite confident and bubbly. And Don was described as being quiet. He was quiet and he was shy. So after Don has arrived at the police station, and like within a minute, they sent a couple of officers straight to the farm because there was a chance that, something's obviously gone down. Like, they didn't need to listen. They just took a look at him and they were like, we need to get there quick. Hopefully to save somebody's life. Although he had said they were all dead, there's a chance that they're not. So they went quick to the farm. The farm was about a 7-minute drive away. The crime scene was not pretty. There was quite a lot of blood. The bodies of Dion, Christelle and Martella were found in the living area of the house, like the sort of TV room, and it was sort of open plan, the kitchen area and the TV room. They were found in there. Martella's body was near her mother, right next to her mother, and Dion was a little bit further away, more into the kitchen area. Other than the horrific situation and the bodies, the first thing that was apparent was that something wasn't sitting right with the whole farm attack scenario, which is what everybody thought had gone on here, because Christelle's bag was on the counter with her purse with money in it. Dion's wallet was literally right next to it, and that also had money in it, cards, things like that. All of their mobile phones were in that area. They were all plugged in and stuff like that. So they were all there. They had not been taken. The gun cabinet, which was in a bedroom, was it Dion's bedroom? The gun cabinet was unlocked and open. The key was in the door of it. It was open and all of the guns were still in there and ammunition. And that's one of the things that they would have definitely taken if this was a farm attack. And all of the vehicles, and one of the vehicles had the key in the freaking ignition. It was like, hello. And that was still there. So it pretty much looked like nothing had been taken. And the house, it's kind of a little bit messy, but I saw some photos of it. I'll try and share some if I can find any. It's a bit messy. It's lived in, is the word I like to use. Lived in. But it didn't look like people had come in and ransacked the place, and they certainly hadn't taken anything of value. Also, there were no footprints. So when they sort of extended their search of the property, there were no footprints around the house, around the area, to suggest anyone had been scouting it out. And there were no tyre marks leaving the property other than the ones from the tyre tracks from their car, the police, and like the truck that Don had driven out. So it was just very suspicious. Don was interviewed properly the following day. So when he was in such a state of distress, his family were called. He had been allowed to wash the blood off and things like that, and he was just quite distressed. So he went off with a family member that evening after the murders. The next day he came back and he was asked more questions because they hoped he would have calmed down by this point. Why is my butt so numb? This is when they took some photos of Don. He had some scratches to his neck. So he said that this was from his sister, because when he had gone back into the house after it had gone quiet, he said his sister was still alive. How awful. He'd gone in, his sister was laying there dying, and he went over to her and she desperately was sort of like clinging onto him, and that's how he got his neck was scratched, and also his t-shirt was ripped. So they found his t-shirt at the property. He had panicked when he'd been and seen his sister died in his arms. So he felt disgusted and he went straight to his room, took the t-shirt off, which he was aware was covered in blood, her blood, and changed into a clean t-shirt, and he left that t-shirt on the floor in his bedroom. So that was collected by the police, and it told the same story. It was ripped. So that's how he explained his scratches. He said that Marthella said that she loved him and then she passed away. Don was asked about the days leading up to the murders because they wanted to kind of gauge if someone was watching the property. The day before the murders, Don's parents had gone to a party at a nearby farm. So they'd gone, and all of the farm hands from their farm, they'd gone as well to this party. So Don and Marthella were left alone at their farm the day before the murders. He couldn't recall anything suspicious or anyone scouting them out or anyone looking. He said it was just like, nothing like that. On the day of the murders, they went to church in the morning. They came home. He shot some meerkats. Random. He went out hunting meerkats. I really like meerkats. That makes me sad because they're just so cute. Why do you want to shoot them? Are they a pest? I guess so, but still cute. He mentioned at this point that the gun cabinet, because they must have asked him, I think, about the gun situation, the gun cabinet was always pretty much unlocked. Anyone that went into their property would have access. The key was in the door. It was normally open. So anyone could have access to the guns at the house. After shooting meerkats, he said that he and Marthella went for a ride on their horses, little ride together, and then they came home and they cleaned her horse, washed it. Is that what you say? Later on after that, when they'd finished washing the horse, they joined their father on the sofa to watch telly. And their mother, Christelle, was in the same room on the computer. John said it was at this point that he got bored. He didn't want to watch telly anymore. And he remembered that there was a lamp or something that I think they were all quite handy, that he wanted to go and fix. So he went out to the shed, and that is when he heard the gunshots. After he found his family dead or dying, he changed his t-shirt, he ran to the shed, he got into the pickup, and he went to leave the property. And as he got to the exit of the farm, he noticed that there were 2 guns laying underneath a tree. So he stopped, and he just reached down and he picked them both up and he put them in the pickup. He said he was just scared that whoever had done this had left those guns there and they were going to come back and shoot him or shoot other people, because there were farm hands that live on the land. So then he stopped again further down on their land to shout to the farm hands who lived in cottage or whatever, to say that they needed to get out of there quickly because somebody was shooting at the farm. Hydrate break. Hydration. And then, here is the bit that piques my interest every time. Forensics. They arrive on the scene and they piece together. I always find this fascinating. Love it. What, is it right to say I love it? I have a lot of respect for the art of forensics, I guess. So they arrive and they piece together what happened. And I find that amazing. Really, really do. They believed that Christelle had, by the way, I think I've been saying Christelle. I think it's Christelle. I just looked at my notes and I was like, oh, I think I've been saying that incorrectly the whole way through. Christelle. I do apologise. I hate getting names wrong. Does my nut. Anyway, Christelle was shot first. She was sitting at the computer table and had her back to her shooter, so she never saw it coming, and that suggests that she was the first one to be killed because she didn't move, she hadn't moved, she hadn't tried to defend herself. It was like a surprise attack, and she was shot twice and paralysed. After that, they believe that Dion and Marthella, who were sitting on the sofa watching telly, they obviously would have just witnessed, it was in the same room, they have just witnessed her mum and his wife be shot. What the hell? And they both get up off the sofa and I'm imagining try to escape. So definitely Marthella, she started to run as if to leap, to get out. Dion's behaviour was more of heading towards the attacker to sort of lunge at the attacker. Marthella was shot as she was leaving, as she was trying to escape, in her chest. And then quickly Dion was shot twice and this rendered him paralysed. He was shot once in the shoulder and I think there was another shot behind the ear. So he was incapacitated. He was down. He fell to the ground. The killer then followed Marthella out of the house. It's like a horror movie, isn't it? Really is. Often these cases are like you can't believe it. He followed her out and then there is blood evidence and there's other evidence, but there's mainly the blood evidence. There's a pool of blood and quite a lot of blood near a tree outside, and her injuries are consistent with being beaten in her head and chest area with likely the butt of a gun and then shot in the face outside. Assuming that she was dead, the killer returned inside again, and at this point it looks like he beat Dion in the face and the sort of chest area, and he then went to get a second weapon. While the killer was doing so, Marthella, having been beaten and shot in her face and her chest, you know, sometimes you think, how where does that strength come from? You think about being shot in the face, game over. She was still alive. She managed to get inside the house again. She came back. The blood evidence shows that she paused at her father's, but I don't think he was dead, but he was unconscious and he was on the floor and probably looked horrific. And then she moved over to the telephone. So her blood is on cabinets near the telephone and on the telephone. And what's that bit called? Hello? That bit. Hi, is off out of the cradle. So she was so close. And then the killer returned. At this point, the killer has a rifle and he delivers a headshot to every victim to finish what he started, and this kills them all. Later on in the autopsy, it is discovered that Marthella has been sexually assaulted at some point in the attack or the days before it. What a crime. The police and investigators kept things really quiet on this one. They didn't give hardly any information to the public, but they lived in a small community. Everyone's got their theories. rumours start spreading. Some are a bit crazy. Some people say that Marthella was getting in with the wrong crowd, or that, you know, it was some sort of satanic cult situation, and that Dion, the father, snapped, and that he shot his daughter and his wife and then shot himself. Literally no evidence for that whatsoever, but, you know, tongues are wagging. But then, 21st of August rocks on, about 5 months after the murders, and at school, in front of peers who are on their lunch break, Don, the son, is arrested. And there was complete uproar about the whole thing, because nobody could believe that this boy, 15-year-old boy, was capable of murdering his entire family. And yeah, like he'd been distressed, he'd acted accordingly, whatever you know, like however it is that you should act when something like that happens. I don't think there's a right way. They didn't believe it. A social worker saw Don at this time as well, as part of, you know, him being arrested, and she just said that there was nothing to suggest he was mentally ill, there were any issues, that he was abused, that he had any traits of being a child that would commit this heinous act. And then the investigator spoke publicly for the first time about the case. They told everybody that there was no evidence whatsoever that anybody else had been on the farm other than the 4 members of the family. They only found their fingerprints and their DNA. There was no forced entry, no evidence whatsoever of a farm attack or anyone having been at the property, not just at the property, but going to it. No tyre marks, no footprints, nothing. They had also been thoroughly investigating Don's story, and the main investigator, listen to the name, was Dick Duval. Is that real? Do you know what I mean? Dick Duval. That is like out of a book, isn't it? What a cool name. Anywho, oh, I've got such a dry mouth. Sorry, apologise. So hot. I'm like drying out like an old shoe. Good old Dick Duval. He conducted some timed reenactments, let's say. Well, that's exactly what they were, of Don's story, what he said happened that evening. And everything wasn't adding up, and we will talk more about that at the trial in a bit. Also, the 2 guns that Don conveniently found underneath a tree as he left the property. I mean, that is odd, isn't it? They were confirmed as the murder weapons. They had nobody else's fingerprints on but Don's. And what sort of farm attack is it where someone or people go to a property, take the guns from the property, they don't have their own, shoot 3 of the people, don't rob the place and leave a witness? No. That's the other thing about farm attacks, is that they kill everyone. So, granted, Don said he was hiding in the shed, but most of the time there is not a survivor. And even if a family member runs, oh God, it's awful, but they are hunted down and they are killed because there can be no witnesses. So it just seems like the story is falling apart. Don is denied immediate bail and he is in custody for 10 days. And then his family they have to bail him out because it's agreed that he needs to attend school. That's what the judge is keen for him to get back to school, because his education is important. Forget the fact that he might have murdered 3 members of his own family, but okie dokes. The fact that the judge wanted Don to continue his education was almost it was laughable, because who wants their kid at school with a possible murder rapist? No one. So all of the parents were up in arms, and the principal, the head teacher, said no, he can't come back. So he had a situation where he did some homeschooling for a bit. Interestingly, people had mentioned, friends, at school, before he was arrested, but after the murders, that he had completely changed. Huge character change. It was strange. He went from quiet, reserved and shy too bolshy, arrogant and confident, like living his best life, kind of. So it was really odd. On the 11th of March in 2013, Don's trial would begin. He pleaded not guilty to all of the charges, which were 3 counts of murder and rape, and also perverting the course of justice. Prosecution, what did they have to say, mateys? Well, Don's hands had been tested for gun residue the day after the murders because he was so distressed and so upset at the time that the kind police officers let him go and wash all of the blood off of his hands and legs and scrub up. And then he went off home with family members. It wasn't until the next day that he was photographed and that they did any testing. So they tested his hands, but he was negative for gunshot residue the next day. However, his clothing did test positive for gunshot residue. However, he had said that earlier that day he had been out shooting meerkats. So, in that case, he would have had gunshot residue on him. So it kind of explains that away. Obviously, the prosecution were like, no, he shot his family. The forensic science and the investigators believe that the murders took place between 6:34 p.m. and 6:54 p.m. because at 6:34 p.m. Christelle sent a text message from her phone to her sister. And it was just like about a holiday or something. So just a generic text from her to her sister. And Don arrived at the police station at 6:54 p.m. So there was that window of time when the murders happened. It was a 7-minute drive to the police station. So Don must have left. What's that in maths, Sophie? God's sake. Show up for using the brain. 6:47, 8, 9, 50. Yeah. So at 6:47, roughly, Don must have left the property in the pickup, possibly even a little bit before that, because he stopped twice. Collect the guns, so he says, and shout out to the farmhands to, get out of here. Well, Sophie, brain, the maths is going on, but that means that he had 13 minutes. A lot can happen in 13 minutes, to be honest, but in 13 minutes between when his mother sent that text and when he would have had to leave to get to the police station, he murdered his entire family. 13 minutes. That's mad, isn't it? Now, the timings that Dick DeVal did, knowing that this text message went off of the phone at 6:34, and when he arrived at the station, Dick DeVal went to the property. He literally went there and he reenacted everything that Don said he had done. He reenacted being in the shed and listening for 10 minutes. He said it was about 10 minutes. You can forgive someone for getting the timing wrong in traumatic situation, but even so, even if it was less, his timing would not have fitted in. There is no way that he could have hidden in the shed, then gone into the property, got down on the floor with his sister dying, held on to her while she died and she said, "I love you," got up, gone into his room, taken his t-shirt off, put a fresh t-shirt on, and then run to the pickup truck. They're just, his timings were not consistent with the times of what, he said was going on. The motive that they suggested, because you do think, my head still boggles with why. Why? They suggest that it was Don that raped his own sister, and the evidence suggested that she had been sexually assaulted, either the day of or the day before, possibly both. So the day before and then again on the day of the murder. And that if this was her brother, that Don suspected that she was going to, or she told him that she was going to tell their parents or that she was going to tell the police. And that is why he murdered his sister and his mother and father. And my biggest question with that is, where did this all come from? Is he mentally ill? Is there something that everyone is missing here? Because they are, living in a rural, isolated sort of way. Did anyone really fully know Don? It's such an awful crime. Why? I don't get it. What do you think? Because it's fascinating. I find this one fascinating. I have no doubt that Don committed the murders. There is no evidence whatsoever that anyone else did. And if they did, they are like the criminal of the year. They are stealthy. No footprints, no tyre marks, didn't steal anything. Like, what? Come on. Dropped in by aliens? No. Blood spatters on his t-shirt again. The t-shirt that he took off and the rip, they did not support the fact, like him laying with his dying sister, because that would have been a certain type of blood mark, and it wasn't. There were all different types of blood splatter on the t-shirt, which suggest that he was just in very close proximity to her being shot and to her being beaten. Also, most conclusively, I believe, are text messages that he sent to a friend after the murder. I mean, it's like, oh, I wonder who did it. He's like, they're chatting, and his friend's like, well, they not, is there no other evidence there? What might they find? Are they going to find someone else's fingerprints? And he says they won't find anyone else's. The text messages are basically him saying, it was me. But this is very cold and callous, isn't it? What the hell happened in this family? Was there abuse? Was he being abused? But people just said that but you never know what's going on behind closed doors. You can't say. It's just very bizarre. The defence was weak. They said that the t-shirt that he was wearing, the ripped one and the blood one, they say that it proved his story, because he said that the scratch and the t-shirt were her dying, and like in desperation. No one wants to be dying, and that's what he said happened, and the t-shirt proves it. It has her blood and it's ripped. However, the blood shows that that's not what happened, and also an expert said that with her injuries, there is no way that at that point, as she was about to die, she would have the strength to rip or tear anything. Although, as I say that, I am surprised that she was shot in her chest, shot in her face, beaten with a gun, and then made her way back into her house and nearly made the phone call to the police. That surprises me. That is strength. So, yeah. But the expert said no. She wouldn't have been able to do it. The expert said the ripping of the t-shirt, the scratch marks on Don, were most likely someone trying to defend themselves. Also, Marthella had a lot of defensive wounds on her arms and hands, and she'd really put up a fight. They said that guns were accessible to anyone on the property. Weak. Also, that theory is crap, because the front door, when the police officers arrived, was still locked. So no one had gone in and out of the front door. For an intruder to walk into the property any other way, it would have been through the family room, to get the guns. So all three members, because, if we believe Don, he's in the shed, all three members of the family are sat there in the family room, and someone walks past, some intruder walks past, goes and gets a couple of guns, and they just sit there and do nothing and wait to be killed. No thanks. Stupid. Also, good point on the defence, there was no DNA evidence that Don had raped his sister. So there was no semen found and no DNA. But condoms, it doesn't mean that he didn't. They said that her injuries were from inserting a tampon incorrectly, and she had an infection and she'd scratched, and that was how their injuries were there. I don't even know if that, what? Don remained motionless, cold, disconnected throughout the whole trial. Something that does bother me with this case is that there was conflicting, people weren't sure about the injuries to Marthella. So that plays on my mind, because if there was no rape, they also said that those injuries could be caused by bear horseback riding and things like that. I mean, what is that likely though? Without that situation, it's even more like, where is the motive? But it doesn't matter in a way what the motive was, because there's so much evidence against him. He did it, didn't he? But you can't help but why? You want to know why, don't you? And if there is, I think the evidence of her being raped is quite strong. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I think the defence were just trying to, put any reasonable doubt, like, well, it could have been horseback riding, it could have been, an infection, whatever. But I think it's probably right. What happened to him? Come back, rape your sister, and then murder your family. It's just like, whoa. After an almost year-long trial because of loads of annoying delays of some form or another. Oh, and at one point he fired his lawyers, fired them. Then he got new ones and they pissed about for some reason. It was all very irritating. It pissed the judge off as well. He was like, excuse me, what? Yeah, he got cross. But anyway, ultimately, after a year of all that business, Don was found guilty. As he was a minor, he could only be convicted for a maximum of 20 years. I read in one source that, I don't know why they bothered doing this, but that he was actually given like 20 years for each murder, so that's 60, and then 12 years, and then a number of years for the rape of his sister, and then 4 years for, I'm not doing the maths, 4 years for perverting the course of justice and lying. So 72 or 76 years. But they can only give him 20. So it's like, what's the point in saying this is what you could have had if you're not going to do it? Shut up. No. If it's 20 years, it's 20 years. Like, yeah, okay, you've been really naughty, but, make him feel like he's like getting away with something, which you won't believe what I'm about to tell you, and it makes me feel sick. He would not have been able to inherit. Okay, because in South Africa, if you have been convicted of the murder of whoever, and you're like set to inherit from them, you cannot. However, his grandfather put money into a trust for Don. So the money that he would have inherited, which is a shit ton, they were rich. That money, by putting it into a trust, itchy nose, makes it a donation and not a inheritance. Well done, Grandad. We'll do some maths again, my favourite. Sentenced at 16 years old, possibly I think 16 or 17 by the time he was sentenced. 20 years, okay, if he serves the full sentence. And let's say, for argument's sake, he was 16 when he got sentenced. 16, 20, 36. So when he is about 36 years old, he will, probably younger, by the way, he will be released from prison and he will not inherit, be given, but not inherit, a fortune. What the hell? Oh my gosh. How old am I? I've just forgotten. I'm 36. Where's my fortune? This case was a bit reminiscent to me of like the White House Farm Murders and the Bain family murders. They were in Australia, weren't they, or New Zealand, and the White House Farm Murders was in the UK. And I find it fascinating when it's what do you call it? Is it famicide? You know, when members of a family, when one member of a family murders the other members of the family. That I can't say the word. It's going to annoy me. Wait there. Familicide is a type of murder or murder-suicide in which one kills multiple close family members in quick succession. Yeah, that. I find that fascinating. And I find the cases always seem to have question marks because there's multiple victims, perhaps. Because who did it? Who was it him? Was it not? You know, I still I sometimes get caught in the White House White House Farm one. I'm like, what happened? Wouldn't you love to know? Like, just love to know. But this one felt similar to me, and yeah, it really did fascinate me. But in this case, yeah, short of literally a couple of killers being like dropped in by a helicopter, like these proper like stealthy assassins to just take them out, like why would that happen? That's not real. So there's just so much evidence that Don murdered his mother, his father and his sister. Just awful. Why? Love to know. Anyhow, one of those ones where you like sleep with one eye open. So apologies for not apologies. I think a lot of you enjoyed watching or rewatching it. The re-upload that I had to do on Tuesday, I don't think some of you caught I did a community post to explain what I was going to do, but I don't think some of you saw it, and that's fine. I took the video down. It was posted a few months ago, I think, and it was the Emma Baum case, and in a very lovely way, somebody that was involved in the case asked me to remove the place names, which I did, because they are so kindly and it made perfect sense, and I'm not in this to be being disrespectful or causing any grief or trouble to people that were involved in the cases. It was also a really big wake-up call, because while I know that it is true crime, you're disconnected, aren't you? You're reading something on a piece of paper, or it's a bit different when you watch a documentary maybe, or if you see things with the people and their families, but sometimes it is literally like newspaper articles, autopsy reports and things like that, and it's a bit disconnected. So it made me realise and remember that these are real people, and that this has affected people all around the victim, not just the victim, not just their family, but all, wider. So if I always hope I'm respectful. I think I am. So I just was like 100%, I'm going to take the place names out. And really annoyingly in that particular, sometimes it's just at the beginning of a video, I just say the place name. Oh, of all the videos, I mentioned it about 10 times. And I'm going through, edited it out. So I did that, and then I had to re-upload because I didn't want to just not delete the video. I didn't want to just delete the video. So I re-uploaded it, and some of you thought it was a new, fresh... Why is my nose running? Is it bleeding? Oh my God, that's concerning. It's not. Some of you thought it was a new, fresh upload, so sorry, because you might have been like 10 minutes in, like, I'm sure that you've spoken about this before. So yeah, that's why that happened. And yeah, so it's just like a double week, isn't it? Because I'm releasing this one today, so happy days. Well, not today, but it's today when you watch it. So, today. Anywho, I hope you have a lovely week, whatever you get up to and whatever you do. If you are in the UK and you love the sun and live for it and you are living your best life, woohoo. If you are like me, then it will be over soon. Luckily for us, we only get 4 weeks of the year of summer, basically. So I should not moan. Have a beautiful weekend. I love you all very much. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Sin and Tonic. Do hope you can join me next week for another true crime story. There's a spider. And a glass or a vase or a mug or a bucket. In this weather, a bucket of gin. Lots of love. Bye.